Right now, Walmart is quietly phasing out a bunch of familiar items on its shelves, and prices that look like they've collapsed thanks to deals are actually a warning sign telling you to stay away, not a signal to jump in and buy today. You'd be awesome if you subscribed and liked this video. $12 eggs. You push your cart past the dairy and egg section, eyes locked on the milk price because that's the number you remember from last week. And that's exactly the loophole Walmart exploits. Milk gets marked down to make the whole section feel cheap, while eggs quietly creep up in small increments nobody notices. The mechanism behind this is called selective pricing, dropping one easy-to-remember item to make up for one that's easy to overlook. The problem doesn't stop at price because great value eggs mostly come from high-density industrial farms, even though the packaging might say cage-free, which sounds very humane. That label only guarantees the hens aren't kept in cages, not that they get outdoor access or natural feed. A neighbor of mine once bought 3 cartons of the store brand eggs in 1 week, and all 3 cartons had at least one cracked egg when she opened them, to the point she switched entirely to buying eggs at her local farmer's market. Compared to small farm brand eggs sold at Aldi or local farmers markets, the yolks here are typically paler with noticeably lower omega-3 levels, sometimes a difference of up to 300 milligrams per egg compared to eggs from flax-fed pasture hens. Most of the cracking happens during transport through multiple distribution warehouses, with a much slower turnover than specialty chains, where eggs go straight from farm to shelf in just a few days. There's another detail few people notice, which is size grading. Extra large and jumbo eggs are often priced disproportionately higher than their actual weight justifies, while medium eggs still work fine for most recipes at a lower price per ounce. Pick up the carton and give it a gentle shake before putting it in your cart. If you hear a distinct rattling sound, chances are there's a cracked egg inside. Also check the packing date stamped on the bottom of the carton, usually a Julian date number from 1 to 365, and the closer it is to today's date, the better. My advice is don't assume eggs here are automatically the cheapest and best option just because you're used to shopping this aisle out of habit. But eggs were just the warm-up for this shopping trip. There's a section right nearby that has the fewest staff watching over it in the entire store, and what's happening in that corner is far more concerning than a few cracked eggs. 11. Fresh produce. Walmart's produce section is typically staffed far more thinly than the canned goods or housewares aisles, and that's not an accident. A former employee who worked in this department once said the morning shift usually has just 1 or 2 people covering the entire section, not nearly enough time to check every bag of produce carefully before restocking, so items close to their sell-by date end up sitting out longer than they should. Overripe bananas, mushy tomatoes, wilted lettuce with browning edges often get pushed down to the discount shelf to make you feel like you just scored a deal. But really, you're just buying leftover stock that should have been pulled 2 days ago. Compared to Trader Joe's or Aldi, where produce turnover is much faster thanks to smaller store footprints, Walmart has to move enormous volume across a huge floor plan, which means longer sitting times in the less visible corners of the display. Pre-bagged produce labels usually don't show a packing date, just a generic best by date, making it hard to know exactly how long the produce has been sitting in the warehouse. Display temperature is another factor people rarely think about, since leafy greens need to stay consistently cold, around 36 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit, to slow moisture loss, but open shelving in a high-traffic area sees temperature swings every time the automatic doors open and close all day long, sometimes shifting 5 to 6 degrees Fahrenheit each time, which is enough to shorten how long greens stay crisp. Before bagging fruit, give it a gentle squeeze to check firmness, flip over tomato containers to check for damp spots or mold, and avoid buying leafy greens on the weekend since that's typically when the oldest unrestocked stock is still sitting out. The best time to buy fresh produce is usually Tuesday or Wednesday morning, right after the beginning of week delivery, when the shelves have just been refreshed. If your household eats salad regularly, this freshness gap directly affects how much of what you buy ends up in the trash. And that's the real savings calculation, not the number on the price tag. 10 baking ingredients. Sugar, flour, salt, baking powder sound like they'd be dirt cheap and the same everywhere, but that's not actually the case. When you pick up a bag of a familiar name brand sugar at Walmart, the price is often noticeably higher than the same item at regional grocery chains or Aldi. And that's not an oversight, it's a deliberate pricing decision. Walmart pushes name brand item prices above the market average to nudge you toward buying great value store brand instead, which carries a better profit margin for them. The problem is that store brand flour quality isn't consistent from batch to batch. A relative of mine who bakes for holidays used to complain that with the same recipe and same mixing method, bread made with the store brand flour rose noticeably less than when she used a name brand flour. The reason comes down to gluten content. Since major name brand all-purpose flour typically keeps protein levels stable around 10 to 12%, while store brand can vary between production batches depending on whichever wheat supply was cheapest at the time. Store brand salt and baking powder tend to be more consistent in quality since the chemistry is simple, but baking powder has a different weakness. Its potency drops off after about 6 months once opened, so a container that's been sitting on a warehouse shelf for a while will make your baked goods rise less, even if your recipe hasn't changed. If you bake for the holidays often, this is a good time to split up your shopping list, buy flour and sugar somewhere with better prices, and it's fine to buy store brand for salt and baking powder. Don't let the convenience of one-stop shopping cost you extra money on items that should be dirt cheap. Before we move to the next item, here's something you should know. 9. Coffee. There's an unspoken rule longtime shoppers whisper about, that name brand coffee at Walmart is priced like a luxury item, not an everyday grocery staple. The same ground coffee bag you've relied on for years is often priced noticeably higher at Walmart than at other chains in the same area, sometimes a full $1 more for the same 12-ounce bag. Coffee is one of the most brand-loyal categories out there. Few people switch brands just to save a few dimes. So Walmart leans on that loyalty to push prices up, then uses that margin to offset other items on deep discount to pull you into the store, like the overripe bananas or near-expiration produce we just talked about. In other words, you're quietly subsidizing those other markdowns without even realizing it. This model is called loss leader pricing, where certain items are intentionally sold near cost to get you through the door, while items you rarely price check carefully, like coffee, make up the difference. I once compared the same bag of coffee across 3 different chains in the same week, and the price difference was enough to buy half a bag more if you shopped at the right place. Do the simple math, a bag of coffee bought every 2 weeks with just a $1 or $2 difference per bag adds up to several dozen dollars wasted over a year, enough for 2 or 3 extra bags of coffee for free if you get it right. The simple move is to compare whole bean or ground coffee prices across a few chains before buying in bulk. For this one, I'll say it plainly, don't buy your usual brand here if you have another option nearby. 8. Peanut butter. Even Target, a chain known for running slightly above average prices, sometimes sells name brand peanut butter cheaper than Walmart, which sounds backwards until you pull up both shopping apps and compare prices directly. The reason comes down to how essential this item is. Peanut butter is basically a pantry staple in nearly every household, especially families with young kids or grandkids who visit often. And because it's so essential, Walmart puts it in the category of items it can price higher without worrying about losing customers. That's a clear example of pricing based on brand loyalty and necessity, not actual production cost. A group of consumers on a family shopping forum once compared the same product line between the 2 chains and found the price gap wasn't small at all when buying enough for a whole month. As for quality, store brand peanut butter tends to have a higher ratio of hydrogenated vegetable oil to keep its texture stable on the shelf for longer, while premium brands use fewer stabilizers, have a stronger peanut flavor, and typically have 1 to 2 grams more saturated fat per 2 tablespoon serving compared to natural whole ground peanut butter. Read the ingredient label carefully. If the first thing listed after peanuts is partially hydrogenated vegetable oil, that's a sign trans fat is still present even if the front label says 0 trans fat, because the law allows rounding down if the amount is under half a gram per serving. If your household eats peanut butter regularly, try comparing prices for the same size jar at a few stores before buying in bulk, because a difference of a few dimes multiplied by how often you buy each month adds up more than you'd think. 7. Maple syrup. Few items on this list expose the trick as clearly as maple syrup, because you're paying for a premium product but getting an average experience. Finest Excellence maple syrup at Walmart is priced at $5.97 for a 375 milliliter bottle, while the pricier option, Crown Maple Organic New York Bourbon Barrel Aged, runs $11.97 for 250 ounces. With names like Organic and Bourbon Barrel Aged, you'd assume this is some rare handcrafted product, but the syrup here often tastes thinner and overly sweet compared to the same brand bought directly at a specialty Vermont farm store or straight from the farm. Maple syrup is graded by color and flavor intensity, with darker syrup carrying more natural mineral flavor, while lighter syrup is often sold at a higher price under a premium label, even though the actual flavor is milder. Some retail chains choose to stock the lighter, cheaper to produce grade, but package and price it like a premium product to maximize profit per bottle. Break it down by unit price, and the Finest Excellence bottle comes out to nearly $16 per liter, while the Crown Maple bottle converts to an even higher rate, around $47 per liter, a price on par with mid-range wine rather than a basic kitchen staple. If you genuinely love pure maple syrup, look for it directly from small producers in the Northeast, where the price can be comparable but the quality difference is obvious from the very first taste. In my view, this one isn't worth the money compared to a more specialized option. Now we're moving into the middle of the list, where things go beyond just pricing. There's something that seems harmless sitting right in your medicine cabinet, but it's actually the most wasted expense on this entire list. 6. Vitamins. Have you ever wondered why the vitamin aisle at Walmart stretches on forever, with every color and every promise from boosting immunity to increasing energy? The uncomfortable truth is that most of the benefits of these supplements haven't been clearly confirmed by science for otherwise healthy adults. A family doctor that a lot of people I know still see for checkups says this plainly, right in the exam room, that instead of taking a multivitamin, adults should focus on eating more fresh fruits and vegetables daily, because the body absorbs nutrients from natural food far more effectively than from a synthetic pill. The ironic part is that fresh produce, especially seasonal produce, is often cheaper than a single bottle of 40 multivitamin tablets. Just look at vitamin C alone. An average orange already provides about 70 milligrams, close to the recommended 90 milligrams a day for adult men, while a multivitamin tablet only lists a number on the label without guaranteeing your body actually absorbs that full amount. The supplement industry isn't regulated as tightly as prescription medication, and independent testing on the market has found cases where actual content was off by as much as 20% from what the label claimed. Another thing few people consider is absorption, since hard-pressed multivitamin tablets sometimes pass through your digestive system without fully breaking down, while vitamins from vegetables come with natural fiber and enzymes that help your body absorb them far more effectively. During routine checkups, doctors typically ask about diet first, then consider whether you need something specific like vitamin D or B12 based on actual blood work, rather than recommending a general multivitamin for everyone. If you're spending money every month on a whole shelf of vitamins in your kitchen cabinet, it might be time to take a second look at your shopping list. 5. Broth. You open the fridge planning to make soup, grab a box of chicken broth, and realize there are only one or two options. No organic, no vegan, no low-sodium version. That's the problem with the broth aisle at Walmart, because compared to regional grocery chains or specialty health food stores, the selection here is a lot thinner. Organic chicken and beef broth is priced at $1.98, which sounds reasonable until you notice it's actually Kroger's own brand being cross-sold through this channel at a slightly higher price than buying it directly at Kroger itself. At the higher end, Sam's Choice chicken and beef bone broth is priced at $3.99, marketed as rich in collagen and good for joints. But the actual protein content per serving isn't much different from the cheaper option, usually only 1 or 2 grams more per 8-ounce cup. That's a common packaging trick, attaching health buzzwords like bone broth and collagen to justify a higher price, while the actual nutritional difference amounts to just a few grams of protein per cup. A relative of mine once made a batch of broth from leftover chicken bones after dinner and found it tasted far richer than the boxed version, at almost no cost since it was just using bones that would have been thrown away anyway. If your household makes soup often during the cold months, this is the cheapest way to do it while also controlling your sodium intake, since some boxed versions run as high as 800 milligrams per cup, nearly a third of the recommended daily sodium limit. For great value pizzadilla. I'll say this plainly right from the start. Don't buy this one because the nutrition numbers behind it are far scarier than the appeal of its $7 price tag. The Great Value Store brand pizzadilla is priced at $7 for the whole thing, which sounds like a good deal for a quick family dinner, but a single slice alone contains 1,770 milligrams of sodium, more than 70% of the recommended daily sodium intake, plus 380 calories. If you eat 2 slices for dinner, that number nearly blows through your entire safe sodium limit for the whole day in one meal. For older adults watching their blood pressure, that's not a small thing. Sodium that high comes from combining processed cheese, industrial tomato sauce, and a tortilla crust treated to hold up longer in the freezer case. Common nutrition guidelines recommend adults stay under 2,300 milligrams of sodium a day, meaning just 2 slices of this pizzadilla alone eat up nearly your entire daily limit. Compared to making your own cheese quesadilla at home with fresh shredded cheese and a little homemade tomato sauce, you control the salt content far better, and the cost difference isn't significant. $7 for the whole thing sounds like a bargain, but once you factor in the cost to your heart health down the road, that price stops looking cheap at all. This one, I'd say, take it off your list entirely, no matter how much the kids love it. Here's something to keep in mind before we continue. The last 3 items on this list involve meat and seafood directly, and this is the part that's made a lot of families completely rethink how they shop every week. 3. Seafood. Walmart's seafood counter looks appealing, with shrimp and fish neatly laid out on ice. But behind that appearance is an issue that doesn't get talked about much, which is that mercury levels in certain fish here have been found higher than the same fish sold at chains that specialize in fresh seafood. The cause isn't really the fish itself, it's the supply chain and sourcing contracts. When a massive retail chain needs a steady supply in enormous quantities year-round, it has to work with many different suppliers, some of whom fish in waters more heavily affected by industrial pollution. Some customers have said they've asked counter staff directly about where a batch of fish came from and gotten fairly vague answers, something that rarely happens at specialty chains that clearly label their sourcing. Larger fish higher up the food chain, like tuna or swordfish, accumulate more mercury than smaller fish, and some big eye tuna has been recorded with average mercury levels 3 to 4 times higher than farmed salmon. Food safety regulators recommend adults eat higher mercury fish no more than once a week, and pregnant women and young children need to limit it even more strictly, a warning that's easy to overlook when you're just looking at a low price on the label. Overall meat quality is also rated lower, with a mushier texture and stronger fishy smell, a sign that the time between catch and shelf is longer than ideal. Standing at the counter, if the fish is whole, check the eyes. Clear and slightly bulging means fresh, cloudy and sunken means it's been sitting a while. For prepackaged fillets, you can't really use that trick, so you're left relying on the packing date on the label. If your family eats fish regularly, especially if you have young kids or a pregnant woman in the house, this is worth buying somewhere that clearly states the catch source, rather than picking whatever's cheapest in the freezer case. 2. Ground beef. There's a common belief that ground beef at Walmart is the cheapest option that still gets the job done. But the reality is more complicated. Ground beef prices here aren't significantly cheaper than other chains when comparing the same fat-to-lean ratio, and the quality usually isn't the best in that price range. The real problem runs deeper at the source. A significant portion of the ground beef comes from cattle regularly given growth hormones and low-dose antibiotics, not because the cattle are sick, but but to speed up weight gain under crowded feedlot conditions. This kind of raising means the cattle don't live in ideal conditions, cramped pens, and little movement, and that affects the texture of the meat, making the fat and connective tissue softer and mushier compared to beef from cattle raised on open pasture. I once tried cooking 2 batches of ground beef side by side in 2 pans, one from Walmart and one from a local butcher shop, and the water and grease that came out of the Walmart batch was noticeably more, a clear sign of added water content and excess fat. Lower quality ground beef tends to shrink far more than its starting weight, sometimes losing up to a quarter of its weight in just a few minutes on the pan, meaning you're paying more for water and fat than for actual meat. Even a package labeled 85% lean can shrink down to close to 75% lean once cooked, a gap very few shoppers notice when planning portions. If your family eats ground beef weekly for spaghetti or burgers, try finding grass-fed beef at a local butcher shop. It may cost a bit more, but the quality difference is obvious from the smell alone once it hits the pan. 1. Low-priced pork. The last item on this list is also the one I need to talk about most carefully, because it doesn't just affect you, it affects a whole chain of people behind that price tag. Pork neck bones at Walmart are priced at $4.31 per pound, down 20 cents a pound from before, and Smithfield pork loin is priced at $4.26 per pound. At a glance, these are appealing prices, noticeably cheaper than many other chains, but the question worth asking is how prices can stay this low, while hog farming costs across the whole industry keep rising year after year. The answer comes down to Walmart's dominant market position. Someone I know who spent years working in livestock farming once explained that with that kind of massive purchasing power, big chains can dictate both price and volume to producers, forcing farmers to sell at razor-thin margins, sometimes barely breaking even or even taking a loss just to keep their long-term supply contract. For family-run hog farms, the profit margin per hog sold some years comes down to just a few dollars, not enough to cover feed costs that rise along with corn and soybean prices. That's the flip side of the everyday low prices slogan you hear so often, because the low prices you see on the shelf are created by shifting the financial pressure onto hog farmers, family farmers who've worked this trade for generations, and are now considering leaving it because they can't make a living at these squeezed prices. As for quality, pork priced this low usually comes from massive industrial farming operations where hogs are raised quickly in crowded pens and meat texture ends up inconsistent from batch to batch. One thing you can check yourself right at the counter is color. Good quality pork typically has an even light pink color, while meat from high-density industrial farms sometimes looks pale or has uneven dark streaks from the animal's stress before slaughter. If you care about where your food comes from and about the people who raised that hog, this is a good time to consider buying pork at a local butcher shop or farmer's market, where you know exactly where your money is going. Walmart is quietly phasing out a bunch of familiar items, and prices collapsing on the shelf isn't good news. It's a sign telling you to stay away. These 12 items are the clearest proof of that. Shop smart out there.